why a pin that Joey Maguire's wife wears to every game is actually the secret for Baylor to upset Texas Tech and get back on track. This is a Locked On Texas Tech, Locked On Baylor crossover.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Chris Level of Locked On Texas Tech in this Locked On Baylor, Locked On Texas Tech crossover. We are just days away from the Butt Bowl in Lubbock. It's been a great one for the visitors the last 2 years in blowout fashion. Obviously, Baylor by 4 touchdowns in Lubbock 2 years ago. Tech returning the favor with a 25-point win in Waco last year. But Chris, I think where we need to start is just the fact that you're sitting there at 5-1. And if I told you after the week 1 victory over Abilene Christian that at the midway point be 5-1 heading into this Baylor game, would you have believed me?
It's funny because if you asked me this question in August, I'd probably say you have a favorable schedule, not easy, but favorable schedule. You probably should take advantage of some early home games. I probably would have thought, too, that you would have beaten Washington State and maybe lost to Arizona, okay, if I was planning it out on paper. But, yeah, to your point, after those first 2 weeks, I mean, there were people writing and just submitting commentary and texting me and talking to me at the grocery store, whatever. Dude, this team's not winning 2 or 3 more games the rest of the year, man. Hate to tell you. And I'm like, okay, it's like so much still to go. And because it didn't look very good, but I wonder if they sit here now because it didn't look very good very early, and that was maybe one of the best things that could have happened. I don't know. It was a 1-1 start, but that 1-1 was
a dour 1-1. Yeah,
it's extremely interesting like palms up, like I don't know. So yeah, there you go. And yet, Baylor's situation has been. I mean, it's like I heard Joey say this on a radio interview he was doing the other day. Coach Maguire talked about how would things look because I think that his comment was Shedeur Sanders is maybe the best quarterback in the country, or one of the best prospects. Just him, and Baylor had him shut down most of an evening, and if not for a miracle play. The victory cigar kind of, like whole coverage at the very end, but it was still a darn near miracle. And then just inches away in overtime, we're probably having a much different conversation here. But the margins in this league are razor thin, I guess is my point.
They really are. And you take a momentum standpoint from that loss turned into a win at Colorado, obviously makes it way different. But I think what's so funny is we talk about Baylor Tech, specifically football, throughout the years as having an immense amount of symmetry, right? Similar histories, a lot of turnover between the two programs. You're seeing it again now. Former Tech GA Dave Aranda, who took over for a job that Joey Maguire interviewed for as a Baylor assistant at the time. So there's a ton of that. And yet you look at the first part of the season, and it's been a lot different in a couple of ways. Obviously, with Tech at 5-1, Baylor at 2-4. Baylor, you could argue, has faced 3 of the top 4 teams in the conference this year, and adding a 4th this weekend in Tech. And to your point about Tech, not easy, no easy schedules here, but pretty favorable throughout the first 6 games. So before we get into kind of this matchup specifically, having said that about the favorable schedule, do you think that, I don't want to say that we're being sold a bag of goods here with Tech, but do you think that 5-1 record is reflective of how good this team can be, a 9-3, 10-2 team?
Well, I think that you look at the body of work. I think they are 6-1 over their last 7 Big 12 games, which is the tail end of last year, and they keep figuring out a way to win. Mm-hmm. Last year it was a Kansas game in Lawrence when Kansas was pretty good. It was a TCU team It was a UCF team that went to a bowl game that was pretty good. The wheels have kind of fall off the Knights this year, and maybe I'm wrong. I felt somewhat vindicated by watching Arizona State do what they did to Utah, which did include Cam Rising. I thought Arizona State was pretty good, and Scatterboo has run over everybody, but he didn't. He only had like 60 yards rushing versus Texas Tech, and I thought Cincinnati, it was pretty good. I felt a bit vindicated when they go to Orlando and get a win. Those were 3-win teams, and I kind of think the same about Baylor, another 3-win team from last year. That was kind of the common theme with why your schedule was supposedly favorable, is a lot of these are at home, and these are a lot of 3-win teams, but every one of them has been much better than last year. Baylor's record doesn't reflect it, but you keep figuring out ways to win, and I think that's because they're healthier, and I think they have, unlike some teams, I think what Tech has shown is that they've got a variety of different ways they can beat you. They've beaten people with the takeaway on defense. They've beaten people with throwing the football down the field, or they've beaten them with the run game. And I think their special teams has been stellar. And so there's a variety of different things that I think that – so we'll see. I don't know if they're better than Iowa State or BYU or even Kansas State or Colorado for that matter. I don't know. They may not even be better than Baylor. But to this point, they have figured out ways to win. And that's, man, I think as ugly as it may have been at times, you just keep you're not going to apologize for any of them as long as you keep figuring out at the end of the day. And am I wrong? I mean, I know you're probably sick of hearing about they've lost to all these good teams and all that. But I look at it from the outside and say, you played a bad first half versus BYU. You played a bad second half versus Ames. Other than that, it's been – and you've dealt with a QB injury. I know all too well what that looks like, but you take me through it. Yeah, you take me through it.
Yeah, and I think from the Baylor fan standpoint, that is part of the context, right? Like, these are good teams that they've lost to. The front half of their schedule, which seemed to be favorable going into the season, certainly is now not. It's looking at the back half looks a lot brighter than it does the first half of it here. But I think the thing that's tiring on Baylor fans is, we said that last year for a ton of games of you didn't play a good half. If you had just played better in this half, you would have had that. And it's like, whereas Tech's finding ways to win, it feels like Baylor's finding ways to lose. And in fact, Dave Aranda's used basically that same description of it, with the Hail Mary loss to Colorado and, not showing up for the first half against BYU. So you got to come back, and a comeback falls short. Having an early lead against Iowa State, fool's gold, they come back. And so it's been a few different ways to lose. And the other thing too is like, I mean, again, we've just kind of heard it all before, but the other thing is that Dave Aranda is obviously on the hot seat. Everyone in America knows that. And so it's all well and good that they're playing better than they were last year, but the results have to come or else, I mean, we're going to get in the Parcells line. You are what your record says you are. And that's what people are going to see. If Baylor's a competitive 5-7, they're still not making a bowl. You don't get a bowl bid for that. And so all of that context of Dave Aranda being on the hot seat, I think puts a lot of extra pressure on this of, the effort is better, but the results just aren't there. And there needs to be some results at some point. And it's not an easy one to go and say, all right, hey, you're coming off a bye week. Here's a pseudo must win. Oh yeah, it's at Tech, by the way. Like it's a tough ask for this team and what they've been through the last few years to just go on the road and have a win at Tech. But yeah, there is that sentiment to your point of it has been a tough schedule. They have been close games for the most part. But it's almost like new problems are arising as other strengths. As you start to find strengths, you also find weaknesses. Hey, you, NFL fan, did you know that you could score a big return early in this season with our friends on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook? When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you went and placed your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just had my girlfriend's sister message me the other day. She got the $200 in bonus bets. and needed my help to use it. And I don't think that was a great idea, but getting the $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet is a great idea. You can do that at FanDuel.com. Once again, FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Looking at this matchup, I do want to ask you this question, Chris, before we continue on, because I've said this in a few different episodes. We talked a lot of Joey Maguire this week. I know Joey, the motivator. We've all seen it. And Joey is tremendous for a brand and for a pregame speech and, defending home turf and all that great stuff. But I have to defer to you on this. I have to ask, what kind of coach is Joey Maguire football-wise, X's and O's wise? What does a Joey Maguire team need to look like?
Are you asking me like how he operates up here? Is that kind of what you're getting?
I'm saying like X's and O's. Like, okay. Is he a spread guy? Is he a run it down your throat guy? Like, where are we at with Joey Maguire's MO? I need a lesson here.
Yeah, because, I host his coaches show each week, and we get into a lot of topics, and you get topics from the audience. And so sometimes you get veered off, which is sometimes the best stuff we really learn about people and all that. So just to give you some context, I think, one, how he operates up here, I think he really lets his coordinators do their job. He has semi-input on everything. Or is aware of everything, or has his. But I think the two things that I think he would die on a hill for is one, and it's a bit old school, but he's said these things in recent weeks. We got to be better defensively, and we have to play good defense if we want to get to where we want to go. This is what he was about when he was with Matt Rule in Waco, and they had Petrie and all those dudes that they had on that side of the ball,
and Clay Johnson.
Yes, yeah, and he talks about these guys, and it wasn't because up here you've had Tyree Wilson, you've had some really good guys, but he just they're very young on defense this year. But he's like, we just have to be better on that side of the ball. He would die on the hill for that. And it's takeaways, his take 3 thing, which I'm sure you guys heard there.
Yeah,
that's going to be a thing. And then I do think running the football. I think those are the two. That's where he's going to. His sweet wife Debbie wears a button on her purse at the games that says "Run the damn ball," and I Debbie always sits right next to me at the coaches show, like right down off the stage. And we joke about it all the time because I love it. I think it's great. Yeah. And she's so sweet about it. And she's just like old school and all that stuff. But yeah, at the end of the day, those two things I think is where what I would come from. Now, how do you get to that point? Like, is he going to be a even man front, odd man front, all that stuff? I don't know if I could tell you hardcore, like he's strongly one way or the other, or exactly how you want to run it. But just rushing yards in general, how do we generate those? Is it via the QB? Is it via 3 different running backs? Is it via outside zone? Is it via hammering at somebody? I don't know if I know enough of that, but I think ultimately those are the two things. But and I think people think that Zach Kittley is anti-running it, which couldn't be, because he's from the Kingsbury tree, right. And which couldn't be further from the truth, because he will win a game 10-9 if that's what is needed. And they've done this. They went to Ames, Iowa 2 years ago and won a game 14-10. They played field position, they punted it, they try to do all these things. They ran QB power at the end of the game to milk it, but it just so happens that you've got Taj Brooks and you don't need to do a lot of that now. But I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's what I would tell you to sum it all up.
Yeah. And that's honestly, all of that answer is what I find so fascinating about Joey Maguire. It's like, we all don't know, like, so many coaches go in there and they've got an identity. They've got a way they want their team to play, like very specifically in terms of the things you talked about, the fronts, the numbers they've got to hit, the way they're doing it. And that confirms just what I've thought and seen about Joey Maguire, is that he's got some core beliefs, right? But he's not like if we don't do a 4-3, then we are not. This is not a Joey Maguire team. He's not doing anything like that. He kind of delegates and is. I don't mean this in a bad way, but a lot like a CEO of a company, the way he runs his football team, and I just find that so fascinating.
Well, and Cam, these days more than ever, you almost have to operate in those terms. That's why it's probably tricky for Coach Aranda calling the defense this year, because you just think about all these guys that are tasked with now. You've got to deal with the NIL component. You're maybe about to have to deal with like managing a salary cap, if you will. I don't know if I'm framing that correctly, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it's recruiting never stops. There's the portal. There's roster. I mean, there's just so many more dynamics that come with being a head coach that I think ever before. And so much of it is fundraising because of how costly it is for you to put a quality product on the field. I mean, and trust me, I thought it was great when Baylor was wearing those shirts back in, what was it, August or September or whatever it was. We pay players. I'm like, yeah, man. I mean, it's not too. Yeah, that's right. This is the name of the game. This is what they've been doing in the SEC for years. SMU was doing it with Gold Trans Ams back in the day, but now it's all on the forefront. But I think he excels in that CEO role, and he's a modern day college football coach, because football-wise, yes, heavily involved, but it's so much of the other stuff that comes with it. I think he excels at and all that. Take me through. So switching gears a little bit, take me through your head coach. We've known Dave Aranda around here for a long time and have admired him as a DC. I tell you who he was real close to was Matt Wells, the previous head coach here, and I talked to Matt about Aranda a lot, and they spent a lot of time up in Utah together, and they've known each other and all that. But, serious hot seat? Is this like, man, let's let it play out? How close was it to switching last year in December, whenever there was a decision needed to be made by Mack Rhodes? You just kind of take me through it.
He's got to wear Carhartt pants on the seat. It's that hot. It's okay. You got to maybe double up on pants. It's really hot. And, because you're talking year 5, it's perilously close to a third straight losing season and 4 in his 5 seasons here at Baylor. And I, for one, was really excited about that the fact that he was taking over defensive play calling duties. Because to me, I was like, look, I don't know if this is the one-stop fix here, but he was a tremendous defensive coordinator. Like, let's not overlook that. Let's not overthink that. He was a tremendous defensive coordinator. And if you want to bring in a guy in an offensive coordinator who's got some head coaching experience and kind of let him run that side of the ball like you would a team, the way Jake Spavital, I think, was told to do, fine. I don't care that he's the only defensive play calling head coach in the country. He used to be pretty good at it. But what's been the problem with this Baylor team is once they've figured out, Sawyer Robertson has had to come in at quarterback, a Lubbock guy, has had to come in at quarterback after DeQuan Finn got hurt. And the offense has started to move a little bit. Still can't run the ball. There's an issue there, but they've put up some points. And then once that happened, the defense fell like a house of cards. And this was before some of the suspensions, but it started with that Colorado game where they did play really well. You're right, for a lot of that game. And they kept Shador and Travis Hunter in check for a ton of that game, but not when it mattered. And I think that the way that game ended we could still be seeing an effect on this team, the way that ended, because then it was the lackluster start against BYU. And then it was just a terrible situation up in Ames, which obviously is a very good team, but to not force a punt the whole game is just, it's eye-opening. It's harrowing. And so, yeah, it is, you got to start stringing some wins together right now mode for Dave Aranda. I don't know that many Baylor fans expect to go into Lubbock and win, but it's becoming to that point where we would love to see some progress, of course, but it is going to need to take wins as well. And you look at the back half of the schedule, again, like we talked about earlier, more favorable than the first couple games in the Big 12. But the way Baylor has gone the last year and a half, it's like, how many do you say those are Sharpie wins? I'd love to say it for Houston or for TCU, the way they're playing, and you're playing them at home, or Oklahoma State's in a bad way. You've got them at home next week. I would love to say that, but the way they've played in 2023 and in this year, it doesn't inspire a ton of confidence that they're going to go out there and get those wins. So it does feel like, and I talked about this week on my show, is that it's coaches that know each other very well, came in at the same time, and essentially the same time, and our programs going in different directions. Guys, sometimes intimate moments happen spontaneously, all right? And we always want to be ready so that we can perform in the bedroom. Hims provides access to treatments that can help you stay hard and last longer, giving you that boost of confidence so you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. They provide access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like the chewable hard mints, Viagra and Cialis, and all their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online. No need for those uncomfortable doctor's visits. You just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. And if prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance needed. One low price going to cover everything from treatments to ongoing care. So start your free trial today at hims.com/locked on. Your free online visit today at hims.com/locked on. That's HIMS.com/locked on for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/locked on. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions do apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
And I think every Tech fan would sit here and say, boy, it'd be nice to have had a Big 12 championship on the old ledger, which is what Baylor has. And I'm sure that if Aranda doesn't have that, maybe the decision gets made sooner or whatever. But you can't take away, and maybe that was Matt Rule's players, whatever. I know that's probably the anti-argument against it, but it is.
But they needed someone to get them over the top, is what I always say. It was Rule's players, but Matt Rule never won a ranked game at Baylor. So Dave Aranda got them over the top. I'll always give him credit for that. And
you can't take that away from him. Yeah. And it's but you're right. It's what have you done for me lately? Sport, I guess these days, maybe much more now than ever before. Take me through Sawyer Robertson, by the way, because he was not the starter out of camp. It was Finn and the Toledo transfer that everybody was excited about. It seems like Sawyer, which is interesting because Barron and Sawyer both semi-recruited by the previous staff to Joey, because in Matt Wells, ultimately they just kind of went all in on Barron. And I think there was some frustration by some folks at Lubbock Coronado and maybe the Robertsons that, you're picking this guy over us. But anyway, now they match up in Lubbock, Texas, of all places. So a pretty wild set of circumstances here.
Yeah, and Sawyer is someone he's had a revelation this year. He came in last year. It was a weird fit in terms of the style of quarterback he is to go and play in a wide zone offense. And he was thrown into the fire pretty quickly. Blake Shapen was hurt week 1. And so week 2 against Utah, of all teams, Sawyer Robertson's out there. And he plays I think he plays weeks 2 and 3. Shapen comes back. And then gets hurt again in the last game of the season. So Robertson plays that last game of the season. And he looks pretty good. He threw for over 200 yards. He threw for a couple of touchdowns. And it was like, okay, is this the guy? Then they go out and get Taquan Finn, a guy I was very excited about. Finn gets hurt in week 2, and it's been Sawyer's job ever since the Air Force game in week 3. And to be honest, Chris, it looks like he gets better by the week. He's a deceptively good runner. He doesn't love to run. He's not the runner that Taquan Finn is, but he's a big body. He's ripped off a couple of long runs, 45-yard touchdown run against Colorado. But he has got and I know this is said a lot about quarterbacks, especially from West Texas. He's got a little bit gunslinger in him. He really
Sure.
does.
Yeah.
He,
Okay.
he doesn't put the ball in harm's way a ton, but there's a lot of times where he's like pumping, almost like really about to throw it, pumps it back and hits a guy. He is cool. He is a calm customer, and it feels like he's getting better by the week. He is having more connections with his outside receivers, Hal Presley, Josh Cameron. He's not, I wouldn't say like a dual threat quarterback necessarily, but mobile in that he keeps plays alive. And he had a play against Iowa State. In fact, it was a 4th down where he was rolled all the way out into the flat and like double pumped and kind of just flipped it to a receiver, almost Mahomes-esque. And it's complete for a 1st down. And you're like, okay, this kid's got some moxie. He's got some cojones, man. Like, and it feels like, I know that's something that you can't quantify in stats, but I know you've seen it plenty where you just realize that this quarterback has got the confidence now.
Well,
that he didn't have last year.
He's got measurables, and he definitely has moxie
Yes.
coming out of his ears. There's no
Yes.
doubt about that, and toughness and all
Yeah.
those things.
And
Yeah.
just cool. So it's a lot of that intangible stuff. But I mean, you'll see it. He really works well against zone defenses. He's got the timing of the quarterback position down, at least at this level, and that's what helps you against a zone. He knows the pockets of space. He can read a defense pretty well. Pretty good arm. I wouldn't say like a all-time great arm, pretty good arm. And so he just feels like he's getting better by the week. And I know there was certainly the case with Baron Morton. We saw him 2 years ago in that game against Baylor, which I've said before, it has to be his worst game as a starter. It was pretty brutal in that one. I think it was 11 for 30 with 3 picks. But this year, Chris, it feels like he's almost taken the gunslinger out of him in a good way. He's a little bit more measured. I ranted about him in yesterday's show about how he's been a big key to the success so far. Obviously, you have Taj Brooks in the backfield. That's a huge help. And I've heard from some Tech fans in the comment section on Twitter, and they're saying, no, they're winning in spite of Barron. Barron still needs to be better. They got Taj Brooks back there. And so I'm like, what is the story, Chris? I'm looking at the numbers, and I've seen a couple of his games this year, and he's impressed me.
Yeah, he has been impressive. I think that his numbers are pretty good. They're not overwhelming, but the best thing. So some context here. When you saw Barron 2 years ago, I think he was, obviously very young, and it was Tyler Shuck's job, but Tyler Shuck was hurt and trying to come back. And I think he even got a throw late in that game, and he just threw a wounded duck, and A.J. McCarty picked it off and ran it into the end zone. That was just a terrible night for Texas Tech and all that, because you mentioned Mahomes. We all remember he was getting inducted that night. It was ugly. But the thing about Barron is, up until this year, he's really never played healthy here. That first year, it was high ankle sprain that he dealt with. He played 1 half in Stillwater. And at the very end of the second quarter, he lands on somebody and like tweaked his ankle, and he dealt with that for the remainder of that year. Last year, he comes in for Tyler Shuck in West Virginia and gets hurt. And the second or third series, he gets landed on, and it's the AC sprain that he had, which he dealt with all the way and through the bowl game. They just played through it. He wasn't practicing in the middle of these weeks or anything like that. So our deal in the offseason was, we just want to see what a healthy version looks like. Like, we think kind of be fun to see what the results would be if he's just healthy. And now we see what we're dealing with. And this is what we've gotten. I think he's been hammered into his head. Get rid of it. Don't take a sack. Throw it into the stands. We have to have you because there's PTSD up here from just QB injuries that go a decade back.
Yes.
I mean, I mean, it really has. And so your program has suffered greatly because of it. And they have a stud freshman that I think they're really excited about, but nobody wants to see anybody but Barron playing in there. So that's part of the measured comment that I think you give. But the best thing about what he's doing right now, it's a 7-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I think that last year they were so embarrassingly average at the skill player spots. it was Taj Brooks, and that's really it. You had nobody, shockingly, at Texas Tech, which has had a lot of receivers over the years. You didn't have anybody that could break any tackles, that could get behind anybody. It was extremely average. Josh Kelly, through 4 weeks of the season, he had eclipsed in catches and yards the 6 or 7 players that exited via the portal last December. And you've got one at Indiana, Miles Price. You've got one at Boston College and Jerron Bradley. You have one at UTSA and I think J.J. Sparkman. You've got, I mean, they one at Wyoming. They spread out everywhere. And Josh Kelly himself eclipsed that whole group because I saw people wrote, oh man, Tech's going to have to really rebuild at receiver. And all those guys that left, you had one guy come in that replaced them all. But then you had Coy Aiken, who he had some catches against Baylor last year, and Caleb Douglas from University of Florida. That has helped Barron big time too. So just so I'm clear, the skill has been upgraded. Yeah. The tight end from Arizona State, Jalen Conyers, has been a huge addition. So all of that combined, I think, has allowed Barron to kind of not have to press or force anything. He's got a running game. He's got weapons that he doesn't have to make the perfect throw. There's been a lot of drops on these receivers. Make sure the fans tell you that when they start telling you that Barron's not, because there's some touchdown passes that have been in the hands of some of these wideouts. They've just been dropped, and that doesn't show up in the stat sheet. But that's just some full context there. But I'm fascinated to watch the QB battle here on Saturday because – I mean, can Barron stay away from the turnovers? Does Sawyer come up and play the game of his life? Is he too amped up? Is he – I don't know. I mean, and that's the beauty of sports. I mean, we'll get to find out together.
Yeah, it felt a lot of like that in the BYU game we had here a few weeks ago, too, of Retzlaff trying to prove he's a guy who can win a game for you, Sawyer Robertson trying to do the same thing, and you kind of have that experience versus too jazzed up, and I think that's going to be a real interesting part of this. But Chris, real quick before I get you out of here, because Tech is the favorite, I'm going to quote it this way or ask it this way: what does Tech need to do wrong or poorly in order for Baylor to win this game?
We can always get into turnovers in this kind of question and stuff like that. I'll try to be a little bit more detailed here because, I mean, you neither team wants to come in and turn it over. That can turn it one way or the other. I think Tech has been phenomenal in special teams. They really have. They've had really good returns. They've been really good in the kicking game. They've snuck in some 2-point conversions and things like that. I think this is a big reason why their record is what it is sneaky, being good on special teams. Baylor's got 2 of the best returners in the conference, statistically and otherwise, punt returner, kick returner, and all that stuff. I'm interested to see that phase of the game. With extra time to prepare, both teams coming off a bye, is there anything that you've got for the other guy with something on a fake or whatever? So the special teams aspect certainly is something I'll be paying attention to. And then ultimately, again, I'm stating an obvious, but I'm not going to do the turnover takeaway thing. Can Taj Brooks, can he run it like he did last year or anything close to that? And I know that Aranda and Baylor, they've talked a lot about, they want to run that RPO stuff that Spavital likes to call, but you can't do it, and it doesn't work whenever you can't run the football. Yeah. So that part of this, who can establish the run quickest? I guess maybe to sum that up. Because if you can establish the run quicker, then it opens up what you're trying to ultimately do. And if you can't, you may struggle. But the special teams aspect, I don't want to gloss over that because Tech's been really good in the kicking game. I think Baylor's kind of struggled. And does it stay that way? Because this is going to be a close game. It's going to be a 1 or 2 possession game. It's what all these Big 12 games are. So buckle up. Yeah.
Run the dang ball. That's what we're getting at here. This is good old-fashioned Texas football. They've been playing each other for a long, long time. Run the dang ball. Chris Level of Locked On Texas Tech does it with Casey Cowan. They do a great job every day because we are your first listen today and every day. Chris, I so appreciate you joining me and getting ready for this Butt Bowl. Do you want to throw out a prediction or no?
No, I do the radio stuff for it.
Yeah,
I try to avoid that. But I will equal, Cam, appreciate you. I've been on some other stuff that we've done together. You're phenomenal. And I know you do a great job, and I appreciate you kind of hosting this crossover episode. It was fun to do it with you.
Chris level, consummate professional, not throwing out the prediction. I respect that. Chris, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll get you caught up the whole week's worth of stuff tomorrow to get you ready finally for this Baylor Tech matchup on Saturday. And then we'll have the post game after that. We'll see you then on your favorite show, the Locked On Baylor, Locked On Texas Tech crossover.